Okay, well, hello. Welcome to the Ruby Learning Center. Today we're going to be taking a look at Rebuilding Rails Chapter 8. And the focus of this chapter is going to be primarily on rack middleware. So, for those of you who don't remember some of the earlier things over here in Rulers, and I'll skip over the code real quick. We had a lot of things going on with config.ru, which is running a rack application. And what we're going to be looking at are various transformers, pipeline steps, whatever you want to call them, or basically what rack is actually doing and some of the things we can utilize even in Rails of what we're doing every day. So let's start getting into the chapter real quick. So the chapter starts out by introducing rack components. And the way Noah describes them is kind of like pancakes because it builds our application like a stack of pancakes out of many thin layers. He also mentions he can't stand the word middleware, which fair enough. For me, I treat it more as a sequence of steps. So for me, it'd be something like application, whatever amount of middlewares you have, or something like that. Essentially, we're just making a pipeline of steps that the middleware goes through before eventually we get to some sort of run. Now, of course, this is hand-wavy, made-up code, so that doesn't matter too much, as much as saying this is kind of like a pipeline going from initial all the way over to our actual delivered application. So let's backspace that real quick. Let's see here. So it looks like we don't have much sample source. We're going to be doing a lot more time talking and kind of live playing around with code here than we would in other chapters. So I might end up making another folder sometime around here, but we'll see. I'll have to think about that. Best quotes, rulers. Yeah, I'll probably add it somewhere rebuilding Rails or just play around with rulers. Actually, let's go back to that RU real quick. So we start out with it saying that you can tell that it's a rack application whenever you have a config.ru file. And you'll notice ours is right here in the best quotes application, which is using our rulers framework. So what we're doing right here is that we have the config application, and then we have run, which again, anything that responds to call will be able to be used here. In the original one, we had run with a proc, which just returns back 200 HTML content type with this text. So that was what we started with way back in the first couple of chapters. Now, the book goes on to mention that rackup specifies a stack of middleware which makes up this application. And again, the way I choose to look at it is the step of transformations or the series of transformations that apply whenever there's data in going to eventual data out. Let's see here. Yeah, let's go ahead and make a new folder real quick inside here. Let's call this rec tests. Right, I don't have that set up on that terminal. Okay, so we got rec test over here. Let's go ahead and start with inside rack test, we don't need best quotes. Let's go ahead and make a new file, config.ru, and then we will just take I prefer do end on some of these multi-liners. So let's say 200. Content type, text HTML, and then we have our body of there are a few other things that this might do later, but we can save that for now. And if we go into here, right. Okay, let's steal that from rulers real quick. Yoink. Go to rebuilding Rails, rec test, save that. Don't particularly need our spec. Well, we'll leave it there for now. So we'll go ahead and put rack in here, take that out, don't need this, and save that. Bundle. Okay, now let's try that out. Okay, what does rulers have in gem spec? Okay, so we have rack there. So exactly what's in there again? Let's see here. Cannot find executable rack up for gem rack. Bundler. Come now. Yes, you do. Rank, rack. Oh, right. Just because rack ended up going to 3. Let's go ahead and downgrade that real quick, just to see if that will help it. Okay. So apparently it wants that type of block. Weird. That shouldn't matter. Okay. So we'll go ahead and put WebRec in there, and then that should about have it. Oh, it's some small thing in this. Okay. Localhost 3001, and we are back at rack body. So we have that. There has to be some sort of weird precedence thing for this. Anyway, Ruby does Ruby. Okay. Just don't care too much about that. So let's keep going here. So we have that first one. Let's put a comma double B here and say chapter 8, and then page 112. Comment that out just so we don't have anything else here, and then we will do the second example they have in there. Okay, so we can go ahead and put that there. Add some extra space. Space is free. Always use extra space. I'll explain this in 1 second. Let's rewrite that to be 2, just so we have some proof that's actually working. There we go. So what's happening here? Some of you might not know that you can define methods like this as well, which is whatever object instance we have, we can actually define methods on it directly like this. And these methods are only visible. Actually, let's show you real quick. Put that there, restart that, hit over to here. Aha, there it goes. So in this case, object, which is our instance, does have a method called call. But if I were to say instance methods of object, it's not there because we're only defining this method right here on this particular object, no other objects. So that can be useful, but be careful how much you actually end up using it. Anyway, let's go ahead and keep going a little bit. So the next one we get into is running some intermediate layers. Let's put this to page 113, and we'll just go ahead and copy and paste this real quick. And the problem with copying and pasting from PDFs is it does not respect white space at all. So we don't need that anymore. We can copy out the second one real quick. Then go ahead and run this. So it puts us back to there. Might put a space after that. And then we'll put a 3 in there just so it's a little clear what we're doing. Could we use the rebrand thing from previous chapters? Yes, but slightly lazy, so we won't worry too much about that. Okay. So there's an implication here with what they're trying to do, which is that we have multiple layers we could potentially compose into this. Now, I'd be curious about something. There might be some fun experimentation we can do later as far as proc composition or some other things like that. I'll have to think about that. Let's see here. So let's take a look at what we're actually using here, because Rack does have some methods for dealing with this without kind of doing this weird inner layer, outer layer stuff. So the book goes on to mention, this is page 113, that actual Rack middleware does not know about layer names or anything like that, and it'd be really hard to write this. So Rack, instead, as the book mentions, passes each layer, its next layer, as an argument to initialize. Very bottom layer has no next layer. You just tell Rack to set stack using use. Let's take a look at this. This is page 113 and 114. So we'll go ahead and copy this. Then grab this. That's great. It ends up getting the, anyway, it doesn't matter too much. Let's take this, put this back up here, space that out, comment this out. And then we can try that real quick. Okay. So if you can't see it, there's user and password dialog box right here. As long as we put in secret, we're good. If we don't, we probably get something bad. Okay. Yep, so what Rack is doing is it's going to go through each one of these middle layers until eventually we get down to the official run, which is going to be the last thing that we hit. So the next bit we're going to get into is, we'll grab this real quick. This is on page 114. Making our own middleware. Yoink. There we go. We'll go ahead and give the environment there, which is context coming from the web browser. Using one of the samples over from 114. So we got that, and then we're going to want to return the initial status headers and contents. And then we will take this, put that over there. Page number gets caught with it for some reason. Space sets, put that over there, save that, and we can give that one more try. Okay, so that's working. It's going through our Canadianize, appending the extra argument here, and then doing whatever we want on it. So let's see here. And we can play with a few more creative ones potentially in a little bit. So let's see here. So it goes back to the best quotes config RU as reference, which says that we're using the config application and running that application. And again, this is because it responds to the call method. So let's see what else we got around here in the chapter. So one of the benefits, and the book goes into this in the next section on page 115, 116, is that Rack is so powerful because pretty much everything uses it. And it goes on by mentioning Rails, Rulers, Sinatra, as well as various frameworks, Cuba, Rum, Grape, Camping, Padrino, Rames, Maverick, probably a bunch more. I would bet that Hanami, as well as Rodent, and some others also use this. And it kind of underpins a lot of these things. It's a primitive, which allows you to describe the shapes of a web framework and build on top of that. And because they all use this, they can also use all the same Rack plugins and other things like that, which makes it very, very useful. And the book goes in to mention, well, what does that buy us? Well, if we remember back up to the authentication thing we have right here on line 33, it buys us that any web framework could potentially use that as a primitive for implementing authentication. If you really want, you can make a much more complicated thing like, say, Warden or something else like that. So the book goes in and mentions a bunch of different middlewares, and I will copy this over in a second. And it does not like copying things. Stop it. So I'll grab that. Come on. Come on, scroll. There we go. Okay. Almost got that. Well, copying's not working. So we'll just name a few of these. Like you have authentication, you have digest cascades, chunked for chunking HP, you have logging, you have conditional getters, configurations, content length, type, deflator, which a lot of responses on modern web are gzip to make sure we're not sending more information we need to over the wire. Directory listings, e-tags, head, lint, lock, reload your app when file changes, runtime requests, send files, exception showing, status showing, serving static files. A lot of times you'll end up using Nginx for serving static files because it's a little bit faster and you don't have to involve your Ruby application for those. URL maps and a few other things like that. And then other middlewares in the wild outside of that. Well, there are a lot of them for spam bots, preventing various abuse vectors, DDoS, other things like that. We won't get too many into those. Warden being authentication, which is a little bit more powerful. Anyway. So we won't worry too much about those. Let's take a look into the URL map middleware, which is mentioned on 119. We don't need that. Let's go ahead and comment these out real quick. And this would be chapter 8 on page 119. So we'll go ahead and copy this. PDFs do absolutely love fighting me on copying stuff, though. And for whatever reason, it doesn't believe in giving me back the same spacing. Got that. Let's put that over there. And we don't need the initial comments. So let's take a look at this. So rack URL map. /lobsters, and of course I'm going to need to reload this. Let's start with that. Hit into there. I'm betting this is some form of example of some sort. But hey, we get an ASCII lobster out of it. Okay, there it goes a little bit more into it. So the book mentions that map is a way to tell rack what paths are going to which rack applications. So in some cases, you might notice that Rails has the ability to load or mount another rack application, which is very useful. Like Sidekick would use it for its own dashboard, and various other things can do it. That's the other benefit, is you can plug a bunch of wrap applications into a central router, which can then distribute anything as you wish. else we got? Okay, so on about page 120, it's going to go into a little bit of benchmarking. Yeah, let's type that one out because that's a little bit more pesky. Okay, so we can grab this, put that over there, and this is on page 121. Okay, so we got that. Let's see what we got here. I'll copy these first two. So we got content type, we got that. Minimize a few of these so we don't have too much more stuff over here. Okay. Initialize that with the context application, as well as the number of runs, which should be 100. Got that. Going in that. Then we can go ahead and go into the call method that they provided in here. Okay. You know, we have T there, but instead let's do start time, just so we're a little bit clear about what we're doing here. So we have start time. And that time would be that. Okay. So the book is using without the tilde here, which means that we'd have to have all of our content up against the left, otherwise we get all that extra space. I've mentioned this in some previous sections, but this is why we're trying to avoid doing that. Okay, so we'll just copy the message as it exists, make sure to update that a little bit. In time. Okay. So we got that. We have the output, and then we have the results. I need to find out what keeps reformatting my thing. Okay, I know I could do 10,000 times. I'm going to do 1,000 because I don't want to wait for that. Okay. So we'll go ahead and rerun that. Hit that. And you might notice here on the left, we have our runtime of 1,000 runs with about 100th of a second and some change. Something is slightly wrong with. Okay, fine. Yeah, since it's multiplied by 1,000. Okay, so maybe we can put that up to 10 or even 100,000 if we really wanted to. So let's go ahead and do that. Stop that, hit that, and reload that. So that's going to take a couple more seconds. Okay, so that actually gives us something, which is about 1.42 seconds, or about that long per millisecond run. Okay. There's not too much more in this chapter. So I think that's about it. Before we go into anything else, does anyone have any questions? Nope. Okay. Well, if that's the case, we can go ahead and call it a day for now and check back in next week for the last chapter of Rebuilding Rails, where we will try and decide which book we're doing next, and we will be looping back in the Discord. I'll be tagging everyone on that. It looks like the vote currently is for an intermediate subject. I will, if there's enough desire, also get a beginner subject going, because I do like to make sure we have content for new people that are trying to get into the industry as much as possible. Now, that all said, we can take this over to Discord, but in the meantime, thanks so much for coming out today, and that's all we have. Have a great day.